There are places that rest upon the map, and there are places that bend the map toward themselves. The Caucasus was one of them. It stood between the Black Sea and the Caspian, like a wall raised by the earth in a forgotten age. Yet behind that wall lay roads to wealth and roads to war. To the untrained eye, it was a barrier. To emperors, it was a gate. That is why so many powers marched toward those mountains and why so many generations bled beneath them. The Caucasus became a battlefield of empires because it was never merely a frontier, it was a hinge between worlds. Europe met Asia there, northern ambition met southern memory there. Whoever held the region could guard a border, threaten a rival, and shape the flow of men and goods between vast spaces. The Caucasus was too valuable to ignore and too difficult to rule without violence. Once that truth became clear, the struggle repeated itself across centuries. Its history stretches far beyond any modern map. Persian rulers looked north and saw threatened approaches and old claims. Ottoman rulers looked east and saw a shield that must not crack. Russian rulers looked south and saw security and expansion in the same vision. Between them stood kingdoms and khanates, and mountain societies that already possessed their own laws and loyalties and memories. Georgia carried royal tradition. Armenia carried ancient endurance. Muslim polities carried the politics of survival in a land squeezed by larger powers. Highland communities defended autonomy with a ferocity that few distant courts truly understood. This was not empty land waiting to be organized. It was a human world already full of order. Yet imperial order is greedy. It rarely accepts forms of life it did not create. So the Caucasus became a place where outside powers came in the name of necessity and left behind a deeper inheritance of conflict. The first reason was geography. The mountains did not simply separate regions, they governed movement. High ridges made invasion slow and costly. Snow deepened isolation. Narrow passes turned armies into columns vulnerable to hunger and ambush. Distance weakened supply. But within that harsh terrain were a few routes that mattered beyond measure. The empire that controlled the gates between north and south gained more than a local advantage. It gained the ability to regulate approach itself. This gave the Caucasus its merciless importance. It was hard to conquer, yet it was harder to ignore. If one power withdrew, another could descend through the opening. Stone became strategy. Winter became policy. The mountain wall looked stable from afar. Up close, it acted like a machine that kept producing war. The second reason was commerce. Beneath the clash of arms moved the quieter pulse of exchange. Caravans crossed valleys with silk and salt and horses and crafted goods. Routes tied Anatolia to Iran and the steppe to the Black Sea world. Traders did not issue decrees, yet rulers understood very well what trade meant. A road through the Caucasus was never just a road. It was a stream of tax and supply and influence. A fortress above a route was not merely a fort, it was a hand placed over the throat of movement. To secure a corridor meant revenue. To deny it to a rival meant leverage. This logic outlived the caravan age. Later centuries changed the vehicles, but not the instinct. Rails followed old paths. Strategic energy routes followed older dreams. The region remained a corridor whose value exceeded its size. Whoever stood astride that corridor could bargain from strength. Whoever lost it watched opportunity pass away. In that sense, the Caucasus was not only a battlefield, it was a marketplace that empires armored. The third reason was human resistance. No empire entered the Caucasus and found silence. It found memory. It found local law and sacred habit, and fierce attachment to valley and village and faith. It found people who could negotiate when useful and resist when necessary, and do both within a single lifetime. This is what made the region so difficult to master. Victory in open battle did not settle the question. An empire had to hold roads and build forts, and sustain alliances and reward loyalty and punish defiance. Even then, rule remained fragile. Local divisions sometimes gave conquerors an opening, yet division was not surrender. Again and again, outside powers learned the same bitter lesson. It was one thing to enter the Caucasus, it was another to command it. It was another still to command it cheaply. The region wore down ambition. It consumed men and treasure and certainty. Empires arrived with proclamations of final order and discovered that the mountains did not listen. Prestige made the struggle even more intense. States do not fight only for roads and taxes, they fight for the image of themselves. To master the Caucasus was to claim mastery over hardship itself. It allowed rulers to present themselves as guardians of order on a terrifying frontier. It gave court chroniclers material for grandeur. It warned rivals that the empire could bend even difficult lands to its will. Yet the Caucasus was cruel to such self-belief. Every declaration of final control seemed to call forth another revolt, or another invasion, or another crisis of authority. Maps promised certainty. The region answered with ambiguity. Conquest promised closure. The mountains answered with duration, and that duration often exhausted the victor, more slowly than defeat would have done. So when we ask why the Caucasus became a battlefield of empires, the answer is larger than one king, and one treaty, and one campaign. Geography made the region strategic. Trade made it valuable. Rivalry made it urgent. Local societies made it resistant. Prestige made it irresistible. All these forces converged in one narrow and difficult world. That convergence is why the Caucasus appears again and again in the Chronicles of Power, not as a quiet possession, as a threshold under pressure. There is tragedy in this. The Caucasus is a realm of immense beauty. Peaks rise like frozen fire. Valleys hold towers and orchards and monasteries and graves. Yet beauty did not protect it from history. Beneath every horizon there was a root. Behind every ridge there was a rival. The battlefield was never only the place where armies met. It was a condition imposed upon daily life. Families carried it. Villages carried it. Songs carried it. The ambitions of distant capitals rolled across human communities again and again. In the end, the Caucasus became a battlefield because it was too central to be left alone and too complex to be made simple. That fatal union drew empire after empire into the same stern lesson. The mountains could be crossed, they could even be occupied, but they could not be reduced to a quiet possession. Each power arrived hoping to settle the question forever. Each discovered that the question would outlive its own triumph. That is the deeper meaning of the region's history. The Caucasus did not merely attract empires, it exposed the limits of empire itself. The archives still breathe there, and the mountains remember every crown that passed below.